History made. Georgia Anderson, one of one in a league of her own.
So I was first diagnosed when I was 7. At the time I hadn't heard of diabetes before, neither had my parents, so it was all very new. I just remember feeling a little bit scared and not knowing what was going to happen. I'd had no idea what it meant. We went to the doctors and he basically said I needed to go to hospital straight away. And then it just sort of became life, really. I don't remember that much of a transition, but I think that was down to my parents and how well they handled it. I'd say my parents helped me the most. They really handled it very well. I know it must have been a very stressful time, but I never felt any of that. So yeah, a lot of credit to them, really. Also, the nurses were really, really good at the hospital, some that I still speak to now. They obviously knew what they were doing at the time, and yeah, they were really good at their job. So I have type 1 diabetes, which basically means that my body doesn't produce insulin, which is what regulates your blood glucose. So for me, I have to either inject that insulin or have it through an insulin pump. I spend quite a lot of time thinking about what I eat, more importantly, how many grams of carbohydrates are in everything that I eat or drink. Every time I eat or drink, I have to input that into my pump, and that tells me how much insulin I need. I think 50% of my brain capacity is spent thinking about what I'm eating and where my sugars are and how that affects things on a day-to-day basis. It is a lot. When I first moved to college, obviously I was on my own, and I'm now eating my own meals, creating my own meals, and obviously I've got a lot of pressure to perform on court as well. So that was a really difficult time for me because it meant that I was really fearful of going low in practices and games. That meant that my sugars ran quite high, which at the time I didn't feel like was a problem. But on returning from college and speaking to doctors, they sort of highlighted future health issues that could create. And that's when I realised I needed to make a change and focus more on everything that I was eating. The technology has really helped, and I think it's prolonged my career really, because it was a lot. Just doing injections, especially when you're trying to get such tight control, it meant I was doing multiple injections a day. So it's been a real game changer, the technology, for sure.
And the Manchester Mystics are the first ever WBBL Cup champions, and they race onto court to celebrate. And you've got to say, from opening tip to final buzzer, they deserve it.
So my dad was a basketball player and then became a coach, and then he also coached me for a long time, which was very helpful at times because obviously he understood my game, but he also understood my diabetes as well. My dad sometimes could see the signs before I could, as far as if my blood sugar was going low or too high, and it was more just a check-in. He would ask, am I good, am I okay? Which for normal athletes, that's just a normal thing, but it takes it to another level for me, which is, do you need to come off? Do you need to check your sugars? Do you need to have something to eat? So just having that understanding on the sidelines made it reassuring for me. Diabetes is obviously hard to control in the first place, but then you throw pregnancy into the mix and it just becomes even harder. So yeah, when we decided to have a baby, I had to stop playing completely. For me, it was really difficult to control my sugars, and during pregnancy, you need a really, really tight control. So yeah, I had to stop in order to make that happen and have a healthy pregnancy. So it was really, really hard during pregnancy to keep my sugars in control. You had to be very, very strict, but it also kind of distracted me from the pregnancy. It allowed me to just focus on getting my control right. And then at the end, I had a wonderful, healthy baby, and I'm very, very grateful for that. It was really difficult to exercise during pregnancy just because it was another factor that would influence my blood glucose. So people talk about food and exercise affecting you, but obviously when you're controlling your insulin in order to control your blood glucose, it's really, really difficult. So then throwing pregnancy hormones into that, it just became near impossible for me to exercise. So this is everything that I would put into my bag. So I'm currently on an Omnipod 5. So that's the insulin pump that I'm on. And then I'm also on a Dexcom sensor, and that's the G6 sensor. And they sort of talk to each other and communicate how much insulin I need. So I do a couple of spare insulin pumps, obviously with the insulin, and then spare sensor and some patches to make sure that stays on. I also have a spare blood glucose kit, which I can test my glucose with using a finger prick, using blood. So that's just in case the sensor fails. And then I have glucose tablets always, Lucozade, and a snack if I need it. I think probably the biggest misconception is that, well, first of all, that you can't eat certain things. So they'll hear that you're diabetic and they'll see you maybe eating a chocolate bar and they'll say, oh, can you eat that? Well, actually, yes, I just have to give insulin in order to account for that. The other thing is that we've eaten too much sugar. But for my diabetes, I was diagnosed when I was 7. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily anything to do with my diet. It was the fact that my pancreas just stopped working and I needed to provide that insulin some other way. The other big misconception is that you shouldn't play sport. I remember hearing that from a few people when I was first diagnosed, but my parents actually did a really good job, kept life the same for me. I still continue to play basketball. Growing up, I didn't really speak to any other diabetic athletes, which is the reason now that I want to speak out a bit more. Most recently, I've had parents come to me that have got children that are playing basketball that have been diagnosed with diabetes. So I just hope that I can provide some support and reassurance in that way. So I've had a lot of helpful coaches, understanding coaches, and people on the sideline, staff. They've really been supportive. I think it's important for people to ask questions, and I'm really grateful when people do, just so that understanding can be increased. I think being a diabetic athlete has made me more disciplined. It's interesting because people understand that food influences your blood glucose, but they don't take into account all the other factors. There's something like 42 factors that influence blood glucose, like things like obviously food and exercise, but then hormones or stress levels or the amount of sleep. So all these things I need to consider every single day when I'm just living my regular life. So it definitely makes you a lot more disciplined and focused. The advice I would give to young people is that it's possible. I hope that I'm an example of that. I think growing up, I didn't have many people that I saw as diabetic athletes. But yeah, I just hope that people know that it is possible. I think coaches and clubs can support diabetic athletes by doing some research, understanding the condition, and then reaching out to those players, making them feel comfortable and accepted, and hopefully a relationship develops there. If I could go back and speak to my younger self right after my diagnosis, I would say that you're going to be okay. Everything is going to work out. It's all possible. You're going to be able to have a family. You're going to be able to play basketball for a very long time, even up to the age of 35. But yeah, just anything is possible.